Luke had been riding back to his remote cabin after a long day tending his small herd, when the first flurries of a sudden blizzard began to sweep across the plains, turning the familiar landscape into a swirling, white wilderness. The wind bit at his face, and snow clung to his thick coat, but he pressed on, knowing he had to reach shelter before nightfall. As he rounded a ridge, a movement caught his agile figure stumbling through the storm, barely visible through the dense curtain of snow. Without hesitation, Luke spurred his horse closer and realized it was a woman, struggling desperately against the elements, her hands raw and fingers trembling from the cold. The snow had plastered her dark hair against her pale, frozen face, and her boots were almost buried in the accumulating drifts. Something in her equal parts fear and determination drew him in, compelling him to leap from his horse and wade through the knee-deep snow to reach her. With effort, he guided her toward the warmth of his cabin, wrapping her in blankets and stoking the fire as she shivered uncontrollably. She introduced herself as Evelyn, her voice soft but steady, betraying a composure that seemed almost out of place in her vulnerable state, yet she avoided giving any hint of her background or why she had been traveling alone in such perilous conditions. Luke found himself watching her carefully, noting the strength in her posture and the sharpness in her eyes, sensing there was far more to this mysterious stranger than her fragile appearance suggested. The two sat by the fire in awkward silence at first, each aware of the other's presence but unsure how to bridge the gap between them. Yet even in that quiet, Luke felt an undeniable pull toward her, a combination of curiosity, admiration, and a stirring he hadn't experienced before. He offered her a warm cup of tea, and as she accepted, her fingers brushed his, sending an unexpected jolt through him. They spoke cautiously, exchanging stories of their lives in fragments, and though she revealed little, Luke was captivated by her wit, her insight, and the resilience that shone through despite her obvious exhaustion. The snowstorm raged on outside, trapping them in the small cabin, and in that enforced proximity, something subtle began to shift, a spark of connection, a mutual recognition that neither of them had anticipated. By the time the fire burned low, Luke realized he had not only saved her from the storm, but had unknowingly stumbled into the beginnings of a profound encounter, one that would challenge everything he thought he knew about life, love, and the unexpected ways fate could intertwine two people. The tension between them lingered like the cold wind outside, hinting at a future neither could yet fully comprehend, but both felt the stirrings of something deeper, something that might change their lives forever. The morning after the blizzard, Luke woke to find Evelyn already awake, sitting by the window as sunlight filtered weakly through the frost-covered panes, her breath forming small clouds in the cold air. Though the storm had passed, the cabin still felt cocooned in silence. The only sounds the crackle of the dying fire and the occasional groan of the old wooden walls settling against the wind. Over breakfast, Luke tried to learn more about her, asking casual questions about her journey, her life, and why she had been traveling alone in such dangerous weather. But Evelyn answered with careful vagueness, revealing only small, carefully chosen details that hinted at intelligence and resourcefulness without ever giving the full picture. Luke, curious and frustrated in equal measure, noticed subtle signs that she was far more than she appeared. The way she handled herself, with quiet authority when reaching for a mug, the keen observation in her eyes as she took in every detail of his modest cabin, and the slight tension in her posture that suggested she was always prepared for challenges. Despite her guarded nature, there were fleeting moments of warmth, a laugh that broke through her controlled demeanor, a lingering glance that seemed to search his face, and the way she hesitated before speaking, as if weighing not just her words, but the effect they might have on him. Luke found himself drawn to these glimpses of vulnerability beneath her composed exterior, a pull he didn't fully understand but could not ignore. As the morning stretched into afternoon, the snow outside had turned into a gentle flurry, and they found themselves working together to clear the cabin's small porch and gather firewood, their hands brushing occasionally, each touch sending a subtle shiver of awareness between them. Conversation shifted naturally from small talk to shared experiences, and Luke discovered that Evelyn possessed an uncommon mix of courage, wit, and pragmatism that both impressed and intrigued him. He admired her for facing the storm alone, yet sensed there was a part of her life she deliberately shielded aside that wielded influence and power he could not yet comprehend. By mid-afternoon, a quiet understanding had formed, one born of shared vulnerability and unspoken attraction. As if the storm had not just trapped them physically, but emotionally, allowing a connection to grow in the absence of distractions. Luke's heart raced when their hands met while stacking logs, and Evelyn's eyes lingered on him longer than necessary, a tension simmering beneath her calm expression. Though she offered no confession, her small gestures, a hand brushing snow from his coat, a brief touch to steady herself, spoke volumes, leaving Luke both intrigued and restless to uncover the mystery of who she really was. In those hours, surrounded by the remnants of the storm and the warmth of the cabin, both began to realize that their encounter was no ordinary meeting. It carried the weight of possibility, the thrill of discovery, and the subtle pull of attraction, setting the stage for a bond that would grow stronger as secrets were revealed and hearts opened, each sensing that the other was about to become indispensable in ways neither had yet imagined. After the storm had finally passed, Luke offered to escort Evelyn to the nearest settlement, only to be taken aback when she guided him down a winding trail that led not to a humble home, but to a sprawling ranch that stretched across the horizon, barns and stables dotting the snowy landscape like jewels against the white expanse. As they approached, Luke realized with a jolt that the woman he had rescued was no ordinary traveler. Evelyn was the owner of the largest ranch in the territory, a fact that made his chest tighten with a mix of awed disbelief and a flicker of intimidation. The ranch hands greeted her with respect bordering on reverence, and Luke felt like an outsider, a simple cowboy who had stumbled into a world of wealth, influence, and responsibility far beyond his own experience. Yet, despite the grandeur surrounding her, Evelyn moved with the same composed strength he had seen during the blizzard, commanding attention without demanding it, her presence filling the space with quiet authority. Luke observed her interactions carefully, noting how she directed the workers with efficiency, yet listened to their concerns, balancing power with empathy in a way that made him admire her even more. When she finally turned to him, a hint of a playful, teasing smile flickered across her lips, and Luke felt a spark of the same connection that had ignited in the cabin, though now mingled with the daunting awareness of her social and economic standing. He tried to act naturally, helping where he could, lifting bales of hay and checking fences, but every glance she gave carried layers of meaning, appreciation, challenge, curiosity that kept him on edge and enthralled all at once. Evelyn, in turn, seemed to enjoy observing him navigate this unfamiliar territory, noting the way his muscles worked under his coat, the intensity in his eyes, and the unwavering honesty in his demeanor. Though the power imbalance was clear, there was a subtle shift in the air between them, an electric tension that neither could ignore, blending respect with the stirrings of desire. By the end of the day, Luke realized that his simple act of kindness during the storm had not only saved a life, but had also introduced him to a world he had never imagined, and to a woman whose strength, independence, and magnetism left him both humbled and captivated. The ranch, the snow, and the fading light seemed to conspire to highlight the contrast between their worlds, yet at the same time to draw them closer, hinting that the connection born in the cabin during the blizzard was far from over. Luke's heart raced, not with fear, but with anticipation, understanding that this was the beginning of something profound, a journey that would challenge him, inspire him, and perhaps, if he dared, lead him to a love that transcended the boundaries of status, circumstance, and expectation. As days turned into weeks on the sprawling ranch, Luke settled into a rhythm of work alongside Evelyn, helping tend the livestock, repair fences, and navigate the endless responsibilities that came with managing such a vast property. Yet each task was colored by an undercurrent of tension that neither could ignore. The initial awe he had felt upon discovering her wealth and influence gradually gave way to a fascination with the woman herself, the way she moved with quiet confidence, her sharp mind quickly assessing situations, her laugh unexpectedly warm, and the subtle ways she softened when she thought no one was watching. For her part, Evelyn found herself both intrigued and frustrated by Luke. His honesty, humility, and unwavering work ethic were a refreshing contrast to the sycophants and opportunists who usually surrounded her. Yet his straightforwardness sometimes clashed with her commanding presence, leading to teasing disagreements over the smallest details. Misplaced tool, a decision about the herd, or the best route to the far pasture. These moments, charged with underlying attraction, left both of them flushed with awareness, acutely conscious of the electricity that seemed to ignite every time their hands brushed or their eyes met across the snow-dusted fields. During quiet evenings, they would ride together on horseback, the winter wind biting their cheeks, and conversation would flow from casual observations to stories of past hardships, fleeting dreams, and the unspoken hopes they rarely shared with others. Each shared secret, each laugh, each fleeting glance deepened the connection between them, though neither dared fully acknowledge the feelings simmering beneath the surface. The ranch itself became a stage for their subtle dance of attraction, with Luke's strength and resilience complementing Evelyn's authority and grace, creating moments of harmony punctuated by teasing friction. One afternoon, as they worked side by side repairing a collapsed fence, a sudden gust of wind sent snow swirling around them, and Luke instinctively reached for Evelyn to steady her. Their bodies pressed close for a heartbeat, hearts racing, breaths mingling in the cold air. And for the first time, the tension between attraction and restraint became nearly unbearable. Evelyn's gaze lingered on him, a mix of admiration, challenge, and vulnerability, and Luke felt a stirring. He could no longer ignore a desire not just to protect her, but to be near her, in a way that transcended friendship. Yet both knew that their growing feelings carried risk. Hers were rooted in her position, her responsibilities, and the perception of others, while his were tied to a life of simpler means and humility. Still, the magnetic pull between them continued, subtle but undeniable, weaving moments of closeness into the fabric of their daily labor. By the end of the day, as the sun set behind the snow-capped ridges and the ranch fell quiet, both Luke and Evelyn were left with the undeniable awareness that the bond forged in the storm had evolved into something deeper, connection filled with desire, mutual respect, and the promise of a love neither of them had anticipated but could no longer ignore. The fragile equilibrium of Luke and Evelyn's budding connection was tested when whispers of envy and resentment began to reach the ranch, carried on the wind like the first hints of an approaching storm. Rival ranchers, jealous of Evelyn's vast holdings and her reputation for both shrewdness and fairness, started encroaching on her land under the guise of legal disputes and livestock grazing, while a few unscrupulous individuals attempted sabotage, cutting fences, letting loose animals, and spreading rumors to undermine her authority. Luke, ever protective and unwilling to stand by, took it upon himself to investigate and confront the threats, often riding out in the cold before dawn to track those responsible, while Evelyn's strategic mind devised plans to safeguard her property without exposing herself unnecessarily. Despite their differences, Luke's straightforward, action-oriented approach and Evelyn's calculated, cautious strategy, the crisis drew them closer, forcing them to rely on one another in ways they had not anticipated. Working side by side, whether corralling wayward cattle or uncovering schemes meant to destabilize the ranch, they discovered a deep mutual respect that strengthened the attraction simmering between them. Luke admired Evelyn's intelligence, resilience, and courage in facing threats that would have daunted most men, while Evelyn found herself increasingly reliant on Luke's intuition, physical prowess, and unwavering loyalty. Nights spent discussing strategy by candlelight or starlight also became moments of subtle intimacy, their hands occasionally brushing as they reviewed maps or plans, and their glances lingering a little longer than necessary, each aware of the dangerous mix of adrenaline and desire building between them. When a particularly bold rival attempted to challenge Evelyn in person, Luke was at her side in a protective stance, and for the first time, the tension broke into something undeniably physical and charged, though neither crossed the line. Instead, the shared danger created an unspoken understanding that they were partners in more than just the management of land. It was a partnership of trust, loyalty, and growing emotional dependence. Evelyn, who had always prided herself on self-sufficiency, found comfort in Luke's presence, recognizing that accepting help did not diminish her power, while Luke realized that the woman he had rescued from the blizzard was equally formidable in her own right, capable of commanding a vast empire and holding her own in perilous situations. Through each confrontation and each victory, the emotional bond between them deepened, evolving from initial attraction to a more profound connection founded on shared experiences, courage, and vulnerability. By the time the immediate threats were neutralized, both Luke and Evelyn knew that they had crossed a threshold, one where admiration, respect, and undeniable desire were intertwined, and where the promise of love was no longer a distant possibility, but an emerging reality that neither could ignore. Even as the shadow of future challenges loomed on the horizon, the snowstorm returned with a vengeance, blanketing the ranch in a thick, swirling veil of white that made the familiar terrain feel both alien and perilous, and forcing Luke and Evelyn to take refuge in the cabin once more, echoing the circumstances of their first encounter, yet with a tension far more charged than intimate. The wind howled against the walls, rattling the windows and driving a cold that seeped through even the thickest coats. But inside, the warmth of the fire and the closeness of their bodies created a cocoon where distance and decorum could no longer be maintained. They had spent the day securing livestock and checking fences, hands brushing and shoulders colliding in ways that sparked both heat and longing. And now trapped together with a storm, as the only witness, every glance, every gesture carried weight. Conversation began cautiously, as it always had, but quickly gave way to something more vulnerable. Evelyn allowed herself to speak of fears she had long hidden: the loneliness of leadership, the pressure of maintaining her legacy, and the rare moments when she wished someone could see her not as a powerful ranch owner, but as a woman capable of love and need. Luke listened, his heart swelling with empathy, admiration, and a growing desire to comfort her in a way words alone could not convey. And when he reached out to tuck a stray lock of hair behind her ear, the simple intimacy of the gesture sent an electric thrill through both of them. Their eyes met, lingering in a gaze heavy with unspoken emotion, and in that suspended moment, the restraint they had both maintained began to crumble. Words tumbled out, confessions of feelings they could no longer deny: how her strength drew him in, how his integrity and courage captivated her, and how the bond forged through storms, danger, and shared vulnerability had grown into something neither of them had anticipated but both recognized as inescapable. The fire flickered, casting dancing shadows across the cabin, and as the storm raged outside, they finally bridged the gap between desire and action, leaning into a first kiss that was both tender and urgent, a release of the tension that had been building since their very first encounter in the snow. In that embrace, the cold, the fear, and the challenges of the outside world faded, leaving only the warmth of connection and the undeniable knowledge that they had found something rare and precious in each other. The storm, once a symbol of danger and uncertainty, had become the backdrop for a pivotal turning point in their relationship, one that solidified their trust, deepened their emotional intimacy, and affirmed that love had not only found them but had done so with a force as unstoppable and transformative as the blizzard itself. By the time the wind subsided and the snow outside settled into a quiet hush, Luke and Evelyn had crossed a threshold. The unspoken bond of admiration and attraction had blossomed into a conscious, mutual declaration of affection, setting the stage for a partnership rooted in both passion and unwavering support, one that would weather future storms, challenges, and the complexities of a world where power, responsibility, and desire intersected. With the snow finally melting and the ranch emerging from the harsh grip of winter, Luke and Evelyn faced a new kind of challenge, one that was no longer about storms, rival ranchers, or physical survival, but about navigating the complexities of a relationship where love, power, and pride intersected. Both had grown accustomed to the rhythm of working together, their bond strengthened by shared hardships, mutual respect, and the lingering spark of desire that had become impossible to ignore, yet now they had to consciously choose to embrace it fully. Evelyn, ever cautious, had to reconcile her growing dependence on Luke with her fierce independence and the expectations placed upon her as the territory's most influential ranch owner, while Luke had to accept that stepping into her world would demand patience, understanding, and the confidence to match her strength without losing his own identity. They spent long hours walking the snow-melted pastures, discussing not just the operations of the ranch but their hopes, fears, and visions for the future, gradually building a foundation of trust and intimacy that went beyond physical attraction. Their moments together were a delicate balance of tenderness and challenge, Luke teasing Evelyn when her plans grew too meticulous, Evelyn testing Luke's resolve with subtle provocations, both learning that love in their world required compromise, courage, and vulnerability. Social gatherings and encounters with other ranchers further tested their resolve, as whispers of gossip and the occasional disapproving glance reminded them that their partnership defied conventional expectations. Yet these external pressures only strengthened their commitment to one another, proving that their connection was not superficial but rooted in genuine admiration and shared values. One evening, as they watched the sun set over the rolling hills, hands intertwined and shoulders brushing, Evelyn admitted that she had rarely felt such complete alignment with another person, while Luke confessed that he had never imagined being accepted so wholly into someone's life, power, and world. They acknowledged that love was not merely an emotion but a choice, a conscious decision to stand together, support one another, and face life's uncertainties as a united front. Every action from dividing responsibiliblities on the ranch to defending one another in moments of confrontation became a testament to that choice, reinforcing the bond that had grown from the chaos of the first blizzard into something enduring and transformative. By embracing both their differences and their shared strengths, Luke and Evelyn created a partnership that was equal parts romance and alliance, passion and practicality, vulnerability and fortitude, realizing that the life they were building together was richer, fuller and more meaningful than either could have imagined alone. In choosing each other, they not only acknowledged the depth of their love but also cemented a promise of loyalty, partnership, and unwavering support, a foundation that would carry them through whatever storms, literal or metaphorical, the future might hold, and ensure that the fire ignited in the snowstorm would continue to burn brightly, warming them through every challenge and triumph yet to come. With spring breathing new life into the ranch, Luke and Evelyn stood together on a ridge overlooking the vast expanse of land that had once been a symbol of power and responsibility, but now also represented the love, trust, and partnership they had cultivated through trials, storms, and shared vulnerability. The ranch hands moved busily below, yet the world seemed to shrink to just the two of them, hand in hand, feeling the warmth of the sun on their faces and the quiet satisfaction of having weathered every challenge side by side. Their relationship had evolved from an unexpected encounter in a blizzard into a bond that was equal parts romance, respect, and shared purpose. Every obstacle they had faced, trivial ranchers, harsh winters, societal expectations, and personal insecurities, had reinforced the foundation of their love, proving that what they shared was resilient, enduring, and rare. Luke, once a solitary cowboy, accustomed to relying solely on his own strength, had discovered the transformative power of vulnerability and trust, learning that standing beside someone like Evelyn did not diminish him but elevated him, allowing him to grow in ways he had never imagined. Evelyn, who had carried the weight of leadership and isolation for so long, found in Luke a partner who complemented her strengths, accepted her flaws, and celebrated her ambition without fear or envy, showing her that love could be both tender and empowering. Together they had forged a life where laughter and longing, passion and practicality, independence and interdependence coexisted. In harmony, their connection deepened by the shared understanding that love was not merely a feeling but a conscious commitment to one another. They walked down to the barn, watching the animals graze peacefully, and felt a profound sense of belonging not just to the land, but to each other, and to a future they would face united. Luke brushed a strand of hair from Evelyn's face, and their eyes met, communicating in a glance what words could never fully capture: gratitude, devotion, and a promise of unwavering support. The challenges of the past had given way to quiet triumphs, and the promise of the future was bright, filled with endless possibilities for joy, growth, and adventure together. The blizzards, rivalries, and uncertainties that had once threatened to define their lives were now memories that underscored the resilience of their bond, a reminder that love could flourish even in the harshest conditions. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow across the snow-dusted fields, Luke and Evelyn shared a kiss that was soft, lingering, and full of all the unspoken promises they had made to each other. Promises of loyalty, protection, and a love that would endure far beyond any storm. In that moment, surrounded by the land, the legacy, and the life they had built together, they knew that what had begun as a chance encounter in a blizzard had transformed into a profound, lasting partnership, one defined by courage, passion, and the unwavering certainty that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, as equals, as lovers, and as the heart of a home forged by trust, respect, and enduring love.